Welcome to the Layman's Seminary. Today we're continuing the series on writing my paper through analyzing using my salvation sanctification chart. At least that's how the series started. I done a shocking thing. I don't recommend somebody try this at home, but last night I narrowed my thesis and changed my entire argument of my paper for structure and everything else. And after I did that, it was funny because whenever I was airing this the previous video live, I forgot all about it being live because I was working on uh my paper, because that video that I did inspired me so much to rework my paper. And so people were commenting, and I'm sorry I didn't see your comments. Hopefully that don't happen again, but my paper is due in less than 9 hours. So we'll just see what happens. But I didn't like my my previous format of my paper. It just seems so generic. It's great for personal study and personal analysis, but I didn't feel like I focused in enough, And so let me show you what I did. So initially, I started out using the salvation sanctification chart, the three tenses, three aspects, whatever you want to call it: position, experience, and now ultimate, to evaluate the passage. Then when I came in and started writing on my paper, considering those possibilities, I took it at the Greek syntactical level. So initially, my paper had a lot of Greek in it, a lot of footnotes for Greek if I wanted to go that direction. But this is not an exegetical paper, it's an expositional paper. So then I started interacting with commentaries, how they viewed the Greek and different things like that, their main issues. And I didn't really see anything of significance that I felt like, oh wow, I really need to quote you and point this out on here. But what I did see was a lot of presuppositions, the theology, and those things like that. So I went into the phase of, okay, I got these footnotes here for the commentaries, especially on the language stuff, but I need to simplify things more. And so I started cutting back my paper as much as I could, getting it down to 10 to 12 pages. I think actually I got it to like 8 pages. All right. And then I started saying, okay, what do I need to clarify here? What do I need to add? What do I need to help with the flow and everything? And then as I was doing that, the page amount went up. I can't remember how much. And then I was like, I started realizing that this whole argument relates to how you interpret the word vain. So I was like, okay, I'm going to narrow my argument on my paper to vain claim. And so what I originally was going to do is just an excursus, a side part of my paper actually became the main thrust of my paper. And I'll show that to you in a minute. So from the vain claim, I started going into the lexical stuff, and I'm going to share that journey with y'all in this. And I started studying the words, synonyms, how it's used in the Septuagint, all that type of stuff like that. And then I started organizing this information, my results, according to progressive revelation, from the Old Testament moving forward in books chronological order. And as I was doing that, I needed to start organizing my paper. So I moved some things around out of that progressive revelation order, at least some points. And that brought some clarification. Then once I had all that, I think I was back up to 17 pages. So then I had to start reducing. I started, okay, how do I say this more concisely? And then from reducing, it's coming to the area of simplification. Like, how do I make this paper more simple? And how do I organize it? Now, it's showing that I'm broadening out here, and I am, but I'm still kind of in this phase right now of simplification, a little bit of reduction, organization, getting it to be more coherent, sticking together, and then last of all is formatting. Now, honestly, I don't like doing formatting so late in the game. That means I'm going to have to create a title page, get all my footnotes right, and my bibliography. But the type of footnoting that I've done here, I can get more into because of the resources that I'm quoting. Whereas before, the ones that I was quoting, the commentaries, I really wasn't interested in it. I've kind of made some changes in that area. So we'll just see. There's some things I know I'm going to end up leaving out of this paper, but I got to move forward. Deadline's approaching. So in 1 Corinthians 15, it says, which the gospel which you believed, which you proclaimed to you, and it says, if you continue in it, unless you believe in vain. Well, the word for vain right here is eke, and you can see that typically this is, I think, the NASB sense. It's typically translated as vain. It can be translated as for nothing, or vain by itself, or without cause. Like, okay. So I'm like, all right, so let me look at these resources wherever it's translated in vain, the same word. And in addition to 1 Corinthians 15:2, I saw at this point that Galatians 3:4 and Galatians 4:11 are using this word. So my mind's like, okay, how do I organize this in light of progressive revelation? There was actually a few others that came up as well. It's translated as for nothing in Romans 3:4. So in Galatians 3:4, there it is right there about the vain aspect. Without cause in Colossians 2:18. And so here's the word, the range. I think this was, this is the range. No purpose or in vain. So this got me, okay, it's an adverb for no reason to what end. So it's related to eke, kinon, and kinos. I'm not going to be evaluating kinos, but the kinos I will. So here's the passages wherever I'm seeing it show up: in vain, without cause, as I was mentioning before. I'm like, all right, so now I got this English. Now that I got this Greek word, I want to see how the Septuagint translates it. Well, they take it as rashly, and they translate gara, to stir up strife, go to court, strife, and battle. And that made me think about, what's the connection between stirring up strife, going to court, striving, and battle, and the idea of rashness. And I think I made a connection to that, but I'll save it for whenever I show you what I wrote in my paper. So looking at the Septuagint, this is the only reference to eke in the Septuagint, and it's in Proverbs 28:25. So that's where it's translating the word gara, right? To incite, to rouse, to wage war, to struggle in opposition. So here's the actual passage. An arrogant man stirs up strife, but he who trusts in the Lord will prosper. He who trusts in his own heart is a fool, but he who walks wisely will be delivered. Now, when I hit this, I'm like, man, I just hit pay dirt, because this has a lot of ideas that are in New Testament passages. I would even say 1 Corinthians 15, James 2, Galatians, other places. So I moved forward. And so then I'm like, okay, let me broaden out here. We were just looking at AK. Let me just do how the word vain is translated in the NASB. What Greek words are behind it? So that opened up things to kinos, to mephtain, and mephtaios. All right. So and then I'm like, okay, well, let's do the same thing with the Old Testament. Now, I have background in Hebrew, so I have certain words in my mind that I know about that are associated with vanity, vain, empty, idolatry, things like that. And one of the words is hevel, or hava, the verb form. So, but I was like, okay, let me just, and this is using the King James 1900, but let me just get vain, and let's get an idea about some of the Hebrew words behind vain. Now, there's other tools that I use to confirm this, and across translations and stuff, and I'll show that later. But so this gave me all these Hebrew words, okay? And so that's like, okay, so now this is what I'm thinking. I'm like, all right, I got all these Hebrew words, I got these Greek words. Now, how do I how often are those Greek words translating these Hebrew words in the Septuagint? Because the Septuagint's like a bridge to understanding. So then I started running through Kenos, right? Vain, vain, vain thing, empty, empty-handed. And then what I found out in the Septuagint, Kenos translates a lot of these words that we just saw on the previous page, but one of the ones that I know well, Hevel, breath, vanity, or idols, translates for Kenos. So like, okay, that's interesting. So even though I don't have an Eke connection, I have a Kenos connection to Hevel. Now, I'll jump ahead. Later on, I found out that in 1 Corinthians 15, you have Eke, but then later on in the chapter, you have Kenos 3 times. And so there's a synonymous overlap in certain aspects of that. So, let's see. Okay, this was the old part. So I'm going to stop sharing here. And then I'm going to bring up the paper. All right. Got to start sharing again. Start sharing. And I even changed my chart. Okay. I put how these two systems typically interpret terms. Before, y'all remember that I had position, experience, and ultimate. And I may still have it at the end. No, I deleted it, but I have it in another place. And so I'm like, okay, well, let me just try to simplify this. Let's put the Calvinistic interpretation on one side, and let's put the free grace alternatives on the other side. And so I made this chart. I'll walk through it just real quickly. So positional salvation, eternal preservation, right? We both believe in that. But the difference is that in this system, maybe I need to color this so it could be seen. In this system, it's proven by temporally persevering. But in free grace, it's correlated with temporal perseverance. In other words, there's a relationship there. All right. As far as the positional gospel, in other words, what people think of mostly with the gospel, they believe that you will temporally persevere in it. Same thing with positional standing, positional holding fast, positional belief, and positional vainness. And it's not, you're not truly positionally saved if you don't temporally persevere. So that's the distinction there. Now this one, positional experiential gospel, you may not persevere in either one of those. Same thing with standing, holding, experiential belief, and experiential vainness is possible for eternally preserved who do not. So is possible. Okay, so this is my introduction as it is now. I may change my mind again, but I'm at 13 pages. I want to get down to 12. So does 1 Corinthians 15, 1 and 2 teach that believing in vain means not being truly saved? Now you can notice that this is focusing on believing in vain, whereas the previous one, let me see if I can bring it up. Does one have to continue to believe and behave in harmony with the gospel to remain saved or prove that one's truly saved? So in this version, I don't have the idea of vain thrown forward. I have rather the concept of perseverance of the saints. So is temporal, and now I bring up perseverance. Is temporal perseverance evidence of eternal positional preservation? The Calvinist answers in the affirmative. He interprets this passage as saying that if these professed Christians do not continue to hold fast to the gospel, they must have believed in vain. But if vain means what it meant in the Old Testament and other antecedent revelations, then the Calvinists should reevaluate how they read this passage. This paper will argue that to believe in vain means not to experience the implications of resurrection power in experiential sanctification. So there's my thesis. Okay. So my question believing in vain means not being truly saved, is answered no, it's not. So I'm taking a position, and the opposite position is the one arguing for temporal perseverance. So we have that. The meaning of vain considering antecedent revelation. Antecedent revelation is whatever's been revealed before then. Before 1 Corinthians 15, in other words. The antecedent revelation of Paul's writing of 1 Corinthians 15 includes, shouldn't be included. Let's try includes the Old Testament, James, Galatians, Matthew, Mark, and 1st and 2nd Corinthians. 1st, 2nd Thessalonians. This is going according to MacArthur's ordering of the books in chronological order. The NSB translates 4 Greek words as vain. Let me make this bigger. Kenos, eke, matain, and Matthias. Eke occurs in 1 Corinthians 15:2, and this is the word the Calvinists typically domain. The Corinthians never believe the gospel because they assume that temporal perseverance is proof of positional salvation. Okay. This looks like something I can come back in and reduce. Kenos also occurs in this chapter. All right. Matthias also occurs here. So this also occurs. This is just a placeholder statement. So I can do some synthesis here. I'm not sure exactly how I'll do it, but I'll just highlight it for me to remember to come back. In this chapter, AK is the word under consideration, but these other Greek words share semantic overlap either in 1 Corinthians 15 or in other places. Mephtain is the only word that does not occur to 1 Corinthians 15. However, it is the adverb form of Matthias. Also, Leonido 89.54 shows that it shares the same domain as Eke. Greek word study protocol begins with determining the word's semantic range by examining its classic and Septuagint usage, followed by its Koine, not New York, and New Testament usage. The Little Scott Jones shows that in classical Greek, eke means something that is without plan, purpose, a random thing, or something without good cause. Kenas, eke, matain, and Matthias translate for Hebrew words in the Septuagint. The Septuagint often functions as a bridge to arriving at the possible Old Testament Hebrew meaning behind the New Testament Greek. While tracing down every Hebrew word that translates for each of these Greek words is beyond the scope of this paper will include, beyond the scope, maybe I'll just say that the scope, this paper will include where Eke translates for Garah in Proverbs 28:25, where Matthias translates Hevel in 1 Corinthians 3:20, quoting Psalms 94:11 or in the Septuagint 93:11, and where Matain translates Hayah in Matthew 15:9 and Mark 7:7, with both quoting Isaiah 29:13, and where Kenos translates Reek in Acts 4:25, quoting Psalms 21. Now, I can simplify this. I could take out the New Testament references, and because I include them underneath the discussion, so I don't have to throw them forward here. Okay. I'll come back and discuss the footnotes in a minute. The following discussion will include New Testament references used to identify samplings of the Septuagint. Maybe I should say identify a Septuagint sampling. Sampling where the Greek translates Hebrew. Examining these New Testament references is not the next step in a word study that follows the Septuagint study. However, is not the step that follows, let's just say this, that follows the Septuagint word study. However, after discussion of Septuagint use, a Koine use would be considered. Instead of however, we'll just use the word so. So after the discussion of Septuagint use, a Koine use will be considered. Okay, so this is what I mean. Instead of quoting the New Testament stuff, I just simplify. I said Eke translates for Gara in Proverbs 28:25. Eke only occurs in the Septuagint of Proverbs 28:25 to translate Gara. But Gara means to stir up strife, to go to court or battle. Eke means rashly in this passage. Eke then may refer to how one goes to court or war. So remember, I did my own word studies, using the Logos stuff, but there's another resource I want y'all to be aware of. It's called the Lexum Analytical Lexicon of the Septuagint. And there's more than one of these, but A-N-A-L-Y. How do you spell analytical? A-N-A-L-Y. A-N-A-L-Y. I'm just going to type in lexicon. Okay. So you got a couple of these. You got the lexical-analytical lexicon of the Hebrew Bible. You got the lexical of the Septuagint, and you have the Greek New Testament. So the one we used was this one here. All right, so you'll notice that what it'll do is it'll give what are called Hebrew alignments. And so this one says, Eke adverb rashly. Key passage, Proverbs 28:25. And I got to it another way, but there's other words like, let me bring up an example. Let's do kinos. So it'll give you the Hebrew equivalents. It even gives commentary articles. This is not the resource I was using earlier. One second, guys. Lexical Research Lexicon of the Septuagint. Oh, I didn't know about that one. I need to research that. Maybe I'll use that one in the future. So I use this one, Lexicum Analytical Lexicon of the Septuagint. So you see how this says Hebrew alignment right here? So anytime, what that does is, what it means by Hebrew alignment, it's doing the same thing that the Logos, and Lexum is the publishing company for Logos. It's doing the same thing that those word rings use. In other words, it's showing you the semantic domain and how these words are translated in the Septuagint. So it's saying Kenas, that Rakim, Rik, Seve, Rik, Henam, and Hevel are used here. But I'm like, wait a minute, that ring earlier sure used a lot more words. Then you have this unique Hebrew alignment. So you have shaker, and you have a couple others and stuff. And you got even English glosses, how the translations take it. You got the inflections, like what form they show up and things like that. So what I did was, to reflect, I know what I'm talking about, even though I came to the conclusion without using this resource. The resource confirms my conclusion. I said the Hebrew alignment for eke is gara. See Lexum, Analytical Lexicon of Septuagint. All right, so now these are my observations here. So we already established it means rashly. It says eke then may refer to how one goes to court or war. I think what I said earlier, the manner refers to the manner one goes to court or war. So if you're arrogant and you go to court, right, you're going to be rash. If you go to war and you're arrogant and you're rash, you know, it's going to cause problems. So I said the arrogant man stirs up strife, and an arrogant man is often characterized by being rash. So I'm going to simplify this. The arrogant man stirs up strife and is often rash. Arrogance allows a person to not properly evaluate their situation. He does not count the cost, and the result is a vain attempt. So this is where Jesus says, what man, when he goes to war, don't count the cost, if he builds a project, you know, all that stuff. In contrast to this vain, arrogant, rash attitude is the one that trusts in the Lord, because that's what the next statement after, let's see if I can bring it up. It's too long ago. I don't know where it is. Proverbs 28. 28, 25. An arrogant man stirs up strife, but he who trusts in the Lord will prosper. So you have a contrast between those. Then it says, he who trusts in his own heart is a fool. That's another word for arrogant and fool. Then you have the contrast again, but he who walks wisely will be delivered. Okay. And this act, man, I could probably do a whole exposition of this tied to James, the book of James. I may do that in the future, but I got to move forward. In contrast to the vain, arrogant, rash attitude is the one that trusts in the Lord. Trusting in the Lord is believing. Okay, so I'm going to simplify this, which is believing what the Lord says for position on experiential salvation. The person who trusts the Lord will prosper because he can have an assurance that he's not individually in covenant violation and under divine discipline. It gives him confidence for experiential salvation and sanctification. Yes, some of this could be reduced. I'm just going to highlight it right now. Probably some more of that up there too. The next verse confirms the point of the Proverbs' pithy statement by contrasting the one who trusts in his own heart with the one who trusts in the Lord. That's all great, but I don't need that. The next verse contrasts the one who trusts in his own heart with the one who trusts in the Lord. Instead of being characterized as a prospering one, this person is a fool. Another contrast occurs between the fool that does not prosper and the wise one that will be delivered. I just feel like there's some things I can condense here. All right. This passage alone could have implications for 1 Corinthians 15, 1 and 2. Now, I may move all the Corinthians stuff in one place, but right now this is what I have. Earlier in the book, Paul distinguished the foolish from the wise in chapters 1 and 2. He calls the imagined interlocutor in the diatribe a fool, talking about in our chapter. It is, I need to put the word there, what the Greek word is. It is foolish not to, so the tribe is a fool because it is foolish. Now, Grammarly is not going to like this long, complex sentence, but I can fix it later. Because it's foolish not to believe in the bodily resurrection of believers just because the wisdom of the world, the popular Greek philosophy, teaches against it. Okay. If they stop believing in the implications of resurrection, they will not be delivered from lacking purpose and fulfillment and from God's divine discipline. Okay, and then I have Matthias translates Hevel in the Septuagint of 93:11, and this is Psalms 93:11. I need to include that. Matthias is used in 1 Corinthians to describe the reasoning of the wise as useless. 3:20. This passage quotes Psalms 94:11, which is 93:11 in the Septuagint. I can reduce that. There, Matthias translates Hevel, which means breath, an idol, or meaninglessness. Today, people would say that was a waste of breath. What to worship an idol is to waste one's time, money, and energy on something that does not exist. This word also occurs in 1 Corinthians 15 to describe how their faith is Matthias, worthless, if Christ has not been resurrected. Matthias first appears in the New Testament in James 1:26, describing the worthlessness of Christianity not applied in ministry. And I would say in one's personal walk, but everyone's involved in ministry. Matthias also describes paganism, worthless disputes, and futile life. Matain translates Haya in Isaiah 29:13. Matain is the adverb form of Matthias, and Matthew and Mark use Matain, translated for vain, in those passages. Jesus uses Matain when he quotes Isaiah 29:13 about the people paying vain lip service and mindless traditions. The Septuagint version uses Matain to translate Haya, which may clarify that their actions are vain. Because the word Haya just means to is or to be. It's a to be verb. So it's interesting that they translated it as vain. Useless or meaningless fits these passages. The people are not experiencing the blessings of experiential sanctification. Kinos translates Rick in Psalms 2:1. I wish I could get that. I probably will later. If I could get that on the same line. But there's some spacing issues that occur. So usually this occurs when you have an orphan line, widow and orphan control. See how that brought that up there? So if you have that problem, try that trick. Basically, you go to paragraph, line spacing, and unclick widow orphan control and push OK. Kinos translates Rick in Psalms 2:1. Now, if Kinos, Eke, and Matthias are synonyms in 1 Corinthians 15, they may be synonyms in the Septuagint. Okay, this is out of place. I got to move this around. This means that Gora alone does not inform the meaning of Eke. Kinos translates... Okay, I'm going to have to move this around. I don't know where, but it needs to go somewhere else. So if I'm not sure where to put it, I'll put it at the end of my paper, and I'll come back in and fix it later. All right. Okay, so let me see here. Kinos transfers several Hebrew words and may be behind the meaning of Eke. And then I have the Hebrew alignments for Kinos. You can go there. Hevel links useless to idolatry, which we've already talked about. To hold on to false teaching is a form of idolatry. 1 John 5:21. And I'm going to say confer. I think it's CF. 1 John 5:2-1. For the Corinthian Christians, if they held on to the Greek culture's false teaching against the bodily resurrection, then the resurrection power available to them was meaningless in their lives. So I'm kind of drawing an implication every time as it relates to Corinthians. All right, so we got those words. Maybe what I can do here. Let's see here. Okay. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this, bring this back up, and I'm not going to talk about the New Testament. I'm just going to talk about the Septuagint here. Yeah, let's put this here. Now, Kenas Eke Matthias. Okay, so let me make sure I got that other one. Yeah, all right, that one's there. So, I need to shut my door. There's sound coming in. It's cold, but I'll survive. Okay, so where am I? All right, yeah, right here. So Kenas Eke Matthias, taking this part out, maybe synonyms in the Septuagint. This means that Gerar alone does not inform the meaning of Eke. Now, I need a transition here. So I'm going to highlight this and come back to it and work on a transition. Maybe what I could do is I could put it under here. Coin a word study. I said, Cannot Seke Matthias may be seen as the Testament. This means that Gar alone does not inform the meaning of a K. And then I quote the Koine. And I'm still not happy with this structure, but I can fix it later. Moulton and Milligan. Okay, so remember this. Little Scott, you start out with Little Scott Jones because it deals with classical Greek. Then from that, you go through and you classify the Septuagint usage. All right, because that's going to deal with the time, some of the intertestamental time. And then you're to interact with Moulton and Milligan. Now, let me bring up Moulton and Milligan so you have to see this. Vocabulary of the Greek New Testament. So this is dealing with the papyri, okay? So we're getting closer to the First Testament time. And there's the section for a K. But it says, Moulton and Milligan quote Wachowski using Latin terms to give the range of meaning of a K. The first term he used is audactor, which translates as rashly confirming how Eke was translated in Proverbs 28:25. Translates as rashly. Now, there's some of these words that I think I could take out. Like the word translate shows up so much. And if I can just where it is, if it's a foreign word, you can italicize that. But you can also italicize a word that's being quoted. So if I do that throughout my paper, I could probably get more space. Confirming how Eke was translated in Proverbs 28:25. The second term he gave was frustra, and I don't know how to pronounce Latin, so if you're frustrated, sorry, which translates vain or useless. Moulton and Milligan also cite papyri, where the editor translated with the phrase temere, which means the same thing LSG gave for the range of meaning. Moulton and Milligan also give heedlessness as an option, which means lack of attentiveness. Okay, so the papyri backs up. That's what this is basically saying. This papyri backs up the Septuagint translation of Proverbs 28. It also backs up what the LSJ, the classical Greek, said. And so now we're moving forward into the New Testament. Matthias and Kinos in the book of James. The book of James was the first New Testament book. You don't need the word written because it's a book. It reads like proverbial wisdom literature, partly because it echoes what Jesus taught, which was Old Testament theology. That is good, but if I have to cut it, I'll cut it. Even though the word eke does not occur in the book, the vocative akinos is used in another diatribe passage, James 2:20. Proverbs 28:25 and 26, that also mentions temporal deliverance, is in harmony with James, who does the same. So you're getting what's kind of interesting is how this is working. The first thing is that, like I said, I felt like I hit pay dirt whenever I found this passage. Is you have this one here, right? The very first reference of the Septuagint that actually translates the word eke is in Proverbs 28:25. The classical study of the Greek, LSJ, let me see if I can find it. It translates as confirmed by here. So you're going to see this connection here. And then you have, where's the word rashly? It translates as rashly. Rashly, yeah. All right. So you have this main theme flowing through the Proverbs 28. And I'm not saying it's the only passage, but I think it's very significant. Or it's representative of Old Testament theology here. So you're going through and you got representative from classical Greek, you got representative from Septuagint Greek, you got this confirmed by the papyri here. And then when the book begins of James, I make the link to Proverbs 28. Because it also mentions temporal deliverance, which is in harmony with, as James does the same. And I probably need to give passages right here. So I'm just going to add the word scripture. Again, Matthias first appears in James 1:26. So this is tying back to earlier word studies. So you're seeing a clustering happening in the beginning of James, describing the worthlessness of Christianity not applied in ministry. And I actually just restated this statement just so that the link would not be missed. My professor wouldn't miss it, but other people would. James uses other expressions to convey vanity. He calls experiential faith useless in helping others in need. It was also useless to help Christians escape temporal judgment for being no profit or use to others in God. Okay, I need to put some scripture in here. All right. And this one too. I mean, I know it's like James 2:12 or 13 or something like that, but I'll be more exact later. Okay, so eke, remember that's our primary word, and kinos, which is a word that's also used in 1 Corinthians. See, remember, Matthias and kinos are used in the book of James, but not eke. Then you have eke and kinos in the book of Galatians and 1 Thessalonians. So when Paul wrote Galatians, his theology is shaped by the teaching of Christ in the Old Testament. Both Paul and James had experiential sanctification primary in view. Yeah, that's great. I mean, I agree with this. I mean, I think it's great teaching and stuff, but I think I can cut it. Paul uses eke 3 times in Galatians 3, which concerns similar issues as 1 Corinthians 15. Paul asks Christians deserting the gospel in some sense. It's going to say deserting the gospel in a race in some sense, if they suffered those things in vain after being positionally saved. They have begun their experiential sanctification by the Spirit, but were trying to make themselves mature by the works of the law. Now, another possibility is I can always use abbreviations for them. Typically, that's what I do in my papers, and they make them bulky. And I don't want to frustrate my professors. Not right now, at least. Not on this. They can dock me for other things. They have begun their experiential sanctification by the Spirit, but were trying to make themselves mature by the works of the Mosaic law. They were cutting themselves off. I don't know why Grammarly took that off. From the empowerment God provides for experiential sanctification. There's some of this. I'm going to keep it, but it could be reduced. For them to be positionally saved and then experientially enslaved means they suffered in vain. I like that rhyming. Positionally saved, experientially enslaved, or saved enslaved. Yeah. Their previous sufferings were meaningless if they did not live by the grace faith principle again. Likewise, the Corinthian Christians would have a vain experience. So this is more Corinthian stuff. Paul also uses the synonym kenos when he speaks about how he went up to Jerusalem with revelation from God and gave it privately to those with Christian reputations for fear that he had run in vain. He didn't want his ministry to be viewed as meaningless by other Christian leaders. And I'm going to take this and say meaning. Like I said, some of these sentences are going to be bulky, but that's all right. I'll let Grammarly wrestle with that. All right. In 1 Thessalonians, Paul used kenos to refer to how their coming to them was not in vain. I don't need to, yeah, it's true that because Paul wrote 1 Corinthians, that it makes the argument stronger if I include Paul where Paul actually makes the statements, but really I don't need that because my professor knows that Paul wrote those books, so I might just even reduce that. In 1 Thessalonians, Paul used kenos to refer to how their coming to them was not in vain. He wanted to discover whether they had been tempted by Satan in a specific way, and that would have made their labor seem to be in vain. And I'm going to say in. It doesn't say what the tempted by Satan is, but I could narrow that, but that's not the function of this paper, so it's fine. All right, so we dealt with the antecedent revelation, right? So let's go look at our structure for this paper. We got an introduction. We got a chart. We got the meaning of vain considering antecedent revelation. So, all right. So then we got, and I probably will make an outline for this. Oh, I missed something. Okay, yeah. You got Eke for the Old Testament. Then you got Matthias for the Old Testament. Then you got Matain for the Old Testament. And you got Kenas for the Old Testament. So that's pretty cool. I mean, I got a Hebrew word related to each one of the Greek words under discussion. Then I got a Koine word study of Eke. Then I mean, this is switching to the New Testament. So the book of James, and you got the book of Galatians and Thessalonians. And so that's what led up to 1 Corinthians. Then subsequent revelation about the vain word group. So you got Eke in the book of Romans. We have seen that the antecedent revelation from the Old Testament, James, Galatians, Matthew, Mark, and in 1st and 2nd Thessalonians occurred before Paul makes this argument. No. That's one thing I didn't do. Okay. I'm going to have to insert this. I moved the Matthew and Mark stuff into another place, but I'm probably going to have to make a mention of it somewhere in there. I'll figure that out later. occurred before Paul makes his argument in 1 Corinthians 15. Subsequent revelation can also help arrive at the intention of Paul's uses of the word vain in 1 Corinthians. See, the word, uses of the word. See, if I do this, if I say usage of vain, then it works. 1 Corinthians 15. So one word that I could actually take out is the word. In fact, I could probably say the word and find all the places. This is the word. All right. So Calvin, let's see if this works. Eke occurs in Calvinists typically. All right, so that erased the word one. Okay, let's see what's next. In this chapter, eke is the word under consideration, but these other Greek words share semantic overlap. Okay. Yeah, we know we're studying eke. Eke is word under consideration. Okay. So instead of saying other Greek words, I'm actually going to put the Greek words there. Okay. So that will simplify that as much. Even though the word eke, so even though eke, holding fast to the word of life, and that's different. But the word saved, so this is saved. The word gospel, all right, holding fast the word. Okay, so that brought up so much rich things that I'm going to go with the word. Translates for. Translates four Greek words. I may change that too, but other Greek words, we already talked about that. All right, is the only word that does not occur. We don't need that. Methane does not occur in 1 Corinthians 15. However, it's the adverb form of Matthias, which does occur. That's the implication. Greek word study protocol begins with determining a word's semantic. I'm going to take out a word, determining semantic range. Translates for Hebrew. We don't need the word Hebrew words. Go down every Hebrew. I'm going to keep that the same. For each of these, I'm going to keep that the same. Word study, that's fine. This word also occurs in 1 Corinthians. Faith is Matthias. I'm just going to change this to Matthias. Also occurs or also describes Matthias also describes how their faith is worthless. Then, now another thing I notice is I have how their faith is worthless if, here, I'm going to come back in and fix this. Their faith is worthless if Christ has not been resurrected. Okay, this can be reduced. 1 Corinthians 15. I just need the verse number. Hey, I made a smiley face. 15. I'll just make that so it won't show up as a fair face. Matthias first appears in the New Testament in James. Okay. Matthias also first appears in the New Testament describing the worthless Christian not applied to ministry. Then I can put the verse. And I can shorten the title down later. The paganism, worthless disputes, feudal life. Okay, so that is going to help me reduce things a whole lot. So I think let me shrink the paper a little so I can see what's going on. Greek words share semantic overlap. Like I said, I'll bring those in. So Hebrew word, Greek words, Hebrew words. Koine study of, okay, word group. None of the other words translate as vain are used. I'm just going to put the word others. None of the others. And the word translate, we're going to have to change. We're going to try to cut that one too. And okay, it's empty words. That's fine. So holding fast the word of life, word group, vain word group, this word. All right, so let's go with the word translate now. NSB. All right. While translating every word that translates for each of these Greek words, while translating every word that is behind. Let's do this. Behind these Greek words is beyond the scope, right? Where eke is for gara. All right. Let's try this is for. This should simplify things. Is for Hevel. Where Matane is for Matthew. Where Kinas is for Rick. Where the Greek translates Hebrew. Okay. Is for. Anchors and I'm just going to change this to for Gerar. Is for Matthias is for Hevel. Is for Matthias is used for vain. Okay. Vain is for Haya. Kinas is for several Hebrew words that may be behind the meaning of Eke. First term he used is audaster. Which translate, I'll keep that one. Confirming how Eke was translated. Yeah, it's fine. Second term, frustrated, which translates vain or useless. For the editor, none of these others translated as vain will be used. Is for, no, I like that translated. The subject is for Greek. All right. Right, translated. Okay. So I know I went on a tangent right there, but it helps because look, guys. There's a little bit of a footnote here. But once I do that, I will be on 12 pages. So that's progress. All right. Okay, might as well fix this while we're here. It's for Hevel in where Matan is for Haya. In Isaiah 23, and where Kinos is for in Psalms 2:1. That flows a little bit better. I mean, it's not perfect, really, honestly. But it gives an idea of the structure that I'm trying to demonstrate in the paper. And look, guys, we're at 12 pages. So we're actually in the boundary now. Like I said, I went from 17 down to 8, back up to 17, down to 13, and now back to 12. So we went through all the Hebrew words. We went through the James stuff. We were in the Galatians stuff. And we were in the Romans, okay? We've seen that the antecedent revelation from the Old Testament, James, Galatians, Matthew, Mark, and 1st Thessalonians occurred before Paul makes this argument in 1 Corinthians 15. Sequential revelation can also help arrive at the intention of Paul's use of vain in 1 Corinthians 15. Paul wrote Romans from Corinth and uses a K to describe how the government does not bear the sword for anything, meaning they use it. Bear the sword in vain. I'm just going to say that, in vain, meaning they use it. None of the other translations of vain are used in Romans. However, there are similarities between Romans 6 and 1 Corinthians 15. Paul wants Corinthians to see how the gospel they first believed in has implication for experiential sanctification. See, if I could put all the Corinthian stuff in one area, that would really condense things. But it could take away the continuity of the paper. So I don't know. Therefore, Paul focuses on the experiential message, but gets there by hammering the ultimate message of the resurrection. In Romans 6, Paul mentions positional truth and the implication of the resurrection on experiential sanctification. He doesn't pick up with ultimate glorification in chapter 8. However, the concept of resurrection was introduced in 1:4 and alluded to in chapter 4. Okay, make this bigger again. So here we are. Kinos and Eke in Luke, Ephesians, Colossians, and Acts. In the Gospel of Luke, Kinos is translated empty-handed to describe the result of not serving the Lord. In Ephesians, Kinos, okay, so, man, I could really reduce if I stop tracing which book things are in. Let me think about that. So the book of James, right? Okay, got you there. Galatians, okay. Okay, in the book of Romans. All right, let's try this. Cannot the transient empty hand describe the result of not serving the Lord? Luke 1:15. Kenos tells empty words of deceivers. The empty words of deceivers. Ephesians. Again, bring in the abbreviated version. Paul says it's holding fast, and we don't need Paul's words. So holding fast to the word of life is so that on the day of Christ, Paul will have reason of glory, since he did not run in vain. Kenos. So this is Philippians, but what is the Philippian passage? Did I erase it? Oh no. I never said, that's why. I'll type in the word scripture, and I'll plug those in later. This passage is like 1 Corinthians 15 because both refer to responsibility holding fast. Colossians, okay. Cannot refers to empty deception, people teaching falsely. Colossians translates without cause, because the person has no basis for the perception of the false teachings and practice. That's Colossians also. So this is Acts. Kenos refers to futile things that people devise. Okay. So, all right. So we got that. Now we're getting to parts of the paper which is the older version of things. So if you think about it, let's see here. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 pages of this is new from compared to the previous videos you've seen. Okay. And then we get consider presuppositions and falsifiable. So we got interpretation implications of vain word group in 1 Thessalonians 15. Consider presuppositions of falsifiability. Is this a warning pass for the believer or someone who has never believed the gospel? Well, it's a question. And if it's a question, I could probably turn it into an answer, make a statement, in other words. Interpreters hold that a lack of perseverance shows a vain, non-genuine saving faith. When free grace proponents point out terms in the text to indicate that the audience is saved, such as brethren, the Calvinist argues that Paul uses rhetorical preaching conventions and knows that everybody is not saved. Paul addresses them as saved because they seem to be saved. It needs to be appear to be saved. This claim to phenomenological language appears to be a rescue device that is not falsifiable. This is ironic because Calvinists accuse free grace interpretations of Scripture of not being falsifiable. The Calvinists argue that the free grace proponent can move any passage to the experiential column to support a system. One counter to this charge is that Calvinists can ignore passages about experiential sanctification. Some scriptures seem to indicate that Paul viewed his audience as saved. Paul writes when divinely inspired. All right. It is doubtful when Paul tells the Thessalonians. All right, so let's just do this. Let's make it stronger. Paul tells the Thessalonians they are all sons of life, that they are all positionally, all sons of life. Paul could know these people's motives for preaching Christ. Okay. This could be separate or on the same line. Let's keep it. Also, social context, 1 Corinthians differ from a preacher talking to a mixed group. The book of Acts records that Crispus, the leader, believed in the Lord, his household, and many other Corinthians. The Corinthians are positional saints, which at least means that they are saved. Well, we don't need this. Everybody knows that if they're positional saints, they're saved. So let's just. In 2 Corinthians, Paul mentions that it's been danger of false brethren, 11:26 and Galatians 2:4-5. These brethren refer to infiltrators paid by Jews or Romans to inform or set up Paul. Some may have been Jews. Still, Paul does not seem to let this threat affect how he talks to his audience. A person can only know they're saved because they believe the gospel. The same person cannot for sure know that another person is saved. But the Christians should accept the person that says they believe the gospel. I'm going to make this a footnote, and that's going to buy me some space too. So then, but how he talks to his audience, references, insert footnote. That's another trick, is that if you need more space, you can write footnotes that are size 10 instead of size 12. And so that you have more room. The Christian should accept the person in faith that says they believe the gospel. In 11, Paul also mentions false apostles and deceitful workers, but he never says they're not saved. This would have been a perfect opportunity to expose them as non-Christians. He could have said, do not listen to these false Christians, but again, the situation is different, so one should not necessarily read it back in to 1 Corinthians. Okay, so here's the free grace claim. This passage is written to save people, to save people positionally. And that doesn't, that sounds confused. To people who are already positionally saved. Grammarly won't like it, but saved in this passage refers to experiential temporal salvation. Other terms before saved help identify what type of salvation is viewed. Yeah, that's true, but it's not needed for this paper. The Calvinist argues that a person that does not continue in the gospel is not truly saved. I've said this before. Do I need to keep repeating it, or can I just drag this somewhere else where I've already said it and put the footnote there? Some believe the final salvation will not come with perseverance. This is Schreiner. The present tense here is rightly translated as being saved, rather than positional salvation is an example of experiential sanctification. And I can actually don't need this. So then the present tense rightly translated as are being saved. I could put a footnote here. Not sure if it's going to buy me any room in this particular example, but okay. I'm glad I'm getting into this paper now. Before I wasn't connecting with it. I just didn't feel like there was just so much more that I could do. Something more interested in. All right, so let's see here. That's not the right footnote. All right. Present tense here. Returns are being saved. So 20. That's a reference to the Greek, but it's not overwhelming, so that's good. The gospel here refers to the message about how the Christian can have experiential sight by realizing the implication of ultimate salvation and the bodily resurrection, which means resurrection power moment by moment. I like that. That's definitely what we're doing, but it makes me wonder if I can put all this in one place. The gospel is the way, the instrument, or basis for experiential sanctification. I don't want to quote Gardner because even though he is claiming that salvation needs to be maintained, it doesn't tie to this because is he Arminian? Is he Calvinist? What's he mean by that language? So I don't need him there. Gospel is a message or report in context determine whether it's good news. I'm going to have to insert a footnote, do some word study stuff, but I'm almost out of time. So it's like, I might just argue for a generic term for gospel rather than go into linguistic arguments. But I could show how the word in the Old Testament is used for report. Context determines why it's bad or good. But anyway, most Christians assume that 1 Corinthians 15 is the gospel of how God saves from hell. But if this passage refers to experiential salvation, then experiential gospel may be in view. Don't need this. Can probably move this around. And there's some redundancy. I can clean that up later. Since the context includes all three aspects of salvation, the context will include all three aspects of the gospel. Okay, that's fine. And you know what? I'm going to just footnote this. This is going to give me a lot of room, so this is cool. Support for the positional gospel mentioned death, burial, and resurrection. Support for the experiential gospel because it's experiential use salvation. Support for the ultimate gospel includes a bodily resurrection in the same context. All right, so let's just do that. Let's cut that. 24. Make it a footnote. Size 10. So in the Gospels, it has things as there for positional salvation. I can actually bring these two together. Things unnecessary for positional salvation. I'm just not going to argue that in this paper. I mean, I can argue that, he's raised for a justification and how resurrection and all that, but it's just not needed for this paper. All right. Includes all three S. Nevertheless, Paul wants to see how the message. All right. Spiritual sanctification. So Paul focuses on a spiritual message, but gets there by hammering the ultimate message of the resurrection. Still some redundancy. But let me go forward. These Christians stand in the message about Christ's resurrection, but doubt that they will be bodily resurrected. They also stand in this gospel. I'm gonna say experientially stand in the message about Christ's resurrection, but not there'll be resurrection. As they were standing in the gospel when Paul wrote the letter to them. The Christians. Okay. It's going to take this out. They are not deceived in thinking they are standing. 25. This is not just an argument on the side of the Calvinists, though. Some within free grace do not believe that the Calvinists missed the saving one. They would argue that if a person is trusting Calvinistic system, so let me look at this. They are not deceived into thinking they are standing. They are not deceived into thinking they are standing. It's going to kill it. I'm going to move it in another place, and I may decide I'll use it. Maybe not. We'll just see. Okay. Where are we? That provides a record. Let's see. Think that I stand and argue for spurious faith, temporal faith, or non-efficacious gospel. All right. There's some cool flips of words here that I like. Those who think a person is deceived in thinking they are standing argue for spurious faith, temporary faith, or a non-efficacious gospel. Maybe I reword this. The Calvinist argues that these professors are not even positionally saved. Rather, they have been, if they don't persevere, maybe I bring in the temporally idea. Temporally persevere. I'll fix that. Say if they don't temporally persevere, rather they have been deceived into thinking that they're standing because of a spurious faith, a temporary faith, or a non-efficacious gospel. Those that believe one could pretend to have standing have more ground to stand on because possible person be a false brother and infiltrator, meaning they never believe the gospel. I'm not denying that. Do I need this? I'm just going to let it go. Minimum is 10 pages, so we may actually get closer to the minimum. Their call to salvation was inadequate. Calvinist sees apostasy or perpetual carnality as proof that one is not saved. The context describes their current standing in the gospel. Okay, we don't need that. Gospel concerns the bodily resurrection. We already got that. So we can bring in teaches about the implications related to the believer. All right. Since the text of the following clause modifies gospel, you are being saved. Don't need that. The gospel is also by what they are being saved. Don't need that. They can hold fast to the resurrection implications or no longer continue in these implications. The conditional clause is not a hypothetical condition. So I need to put a scripture here of 15:2. Paul introduces the hypotheticals later in the chapter. It is a first class condition. So is an actual condition. It's an actual possibility, not a hypothetical condition. And then I can put this in footnotes. Okay. So Paul introduces the hypotheticals later in the chapter. Page 10. So let's assume it's first class condition. It is a first class condition, assuming that they will continue. Assuming for the sake of argument that they will continue. To hold fast to the gospel. But it's still possible that they believe in vain if they do not continue. All right. The concept of holding fast is not positional salvation because God's faithfulness holds on to believers, which guarantees security. And there's no one that would claim that. I mean, that is a great statement, but there's no one that would claim the holding fast is positional salvation. So let's just take this out. It's a great statement, but holding fast. Now, I've had the word holding fast a couple times, I think. Holding fast refers to something saved people are doing, and what they are holding on to is the gospel. what positionally saved people are doing, holding on to, is the gospel. Yeah. Taking a stand on the gospel differs from having to stand on the gospel to remain saved. That's a true statement, but we're not dealing with Arminianism, so I'm going to go ahead and take that out. They received and believed, so they stand firm and reflected on the saving gospel. We know that. We don't even need to say that. These Christians positionally believed at one point. If they did not continue, they would have believed in vain. If they do not continue, may not even need a footnote. But this is actually where we're getting into the section about believing in vain. So I'm going to have to work on my flow and tie this stuff in. These Christians positionally believed at one point. If they do not continue, they would have believed in vain. Being in vain means they would not experience the resurrection power to fulfill their purpose while waiting on the glorified resurrected body. A working definition in harmony with the passage is that faith belief is mentally essential. All right, so believed at one point. I'm just going to make this a footnote. Okay. And so that means in the footnote 26, okay, this would be 10. And then we're going to combine 27. Then we're going to erase 27 here. And it looks like we can even, one believes he's supernatural, but the one is positionally saved. Positional belief. I like the terms because, these are terms I've articulated. Other people are not articulating these terms yet, but I floated some in the recent debates, and my professor watched my recent debate as well. So, okay, so video one is positionally saved. What does believed in vain mean in context? All right, so I think I can actually move this here. Does vain here mean no purpose or no concern? Need to find out why it translates no concern. Is it vain because it's untrue, because they never truly believed? This is what some of the things we're asking. This is where I need to get into the lexical stuff. Why do some say the first option is not fit to contest with issues of bodily resurrection, which they think is not true? I don't need that. That's a question for research. But I think I've already came up with that. This would not be hypothetical because they could not have believed this, but was still saved. So hypothetically explain why they should not believe in vain. This looks like this could go underneath the section earlier. Let's see if we can. Single part 10. and I'll fix the footnotes in the next video. One believes it's vain and purposeful. It's vain because it's untrue because they never truly believe. I'm gonna include my vain stuff here. But just not ready for it yet. What is the purpose of 1 Corinthians 15? And this is where I'm thinking, do I move all the Corinthians stuff into one area? It would make the paper look condensed. Like, okay, you got all the word studies here, and a reader could just skip the word studies and then go to the implication section. And then if they disagree with the implications, they could go back and say, okay, let me study out all the words and everything. Let's see if what you're saying is exegetically sound, lexically and exegetically sound. Textually. So, but if I did do that, I could make some condensed, concise statements about 1 Corinthians 15. And so that's what my challenge is. That's what I'm wrestling with, as far as the structure of things. But let me just read this. The purpose for Corinthians 15 is to argue for the truth of the bodily resurrection to correct the Corinthian Christians, so they will experience resurrection power and be useful instead of vain. Paul is not countering the denial of Christ's resurrection. Instead, it addresses the believers to deny that they will rise bodily. Paul is pointing out how illogical that is. He cites what he first taught them, including the message about Christ's substitutionary death, burial, and resurrection. But the content he gives goes beyond that. Paul focused on Christ's resurrection appearance to remind his audience that they believed about Christ's resurrection. And then there's the statement about the synonym thing. Well, I'm still at 12 pages because of these big footnotes. Okay, let's be brave. And let's move all the Corinthian stuff to one place. All right. I'm going to put this right here. I'm going to call it implications. Implications of Proverbs 28. I think that's what it is. On 1 Corinthians 15. Okay. All right. So we did Proverbs 28:25. Okay. Matthias. All right, so this is more Corinthians arguments. All right. Okay. Oh boy, I feel nervous doing this. Implication Proverbs 28. All right, so Matthias, we moved Matthias. Um, okay, here we go again. We're moving that one. I'll fix it whenever I get it all here. Okay. This passage quotes Psalms 94, which so yeah, this is where I'm still gonna say First Corinthians. What is it, 3:10? Okay. Makes me wonder if I want to move all some of that, more of that over, especially the idle, the wastelessness, and the meaningless idea. Oh, this is so difficult. Okay. The Book of James, Thessalonians. Okay, I'm gonna kill this. Paul you 3 times, right, which concerns similar issues. I'm gonna take the Corinthian connection out and put it at the end. Okay. Kenos is right here. Um, hmm. I'm gonna combine these and Kenos. Boy, I hope I'm not messing up. I definitely am getting nervous. I got a lot of different fonts, so I'm gonna make sure that all of them are Time Roman. All of them are size 12. Okay. Okay. All right. Another thing this is going to do is the word Corinthian shows up a lot, and because I'm putting it all in one place, it won't show up as much. So I'll put something like here, C implication section or similarities between Romans and First Corinthians 15. All right, so then I could take this. Oh boy. I'm gonna take this out, even though I like it. Okay, so the free grace claim on 1 Corinthians 15, I can probably bring together I like the implication section here. But yeah. What is the purpose of 1 Corinthians 15? Okay, so once I work on this part right here, the free grace claim, once I get all this smoothed out, that'll be the next thing I work on. I'll get a concise understanding of the purpose of the book, and then the purpose of 1 Corinthians 15, and I'll decide whether I'm going to put that at the beginning or at the end, make it into a conclusion. But I'm feeling I'm in a better place. And so the shocking thing is it's now 5:32 p.m., which means I'm not good at math, but if my paper's due midnight, and I'm counting that as midnight Central Time, but my professor's on the West Coast. So 12 minus, it's 5:32, but I'll just say 12 minus 5. Oh my goodness. That's 4 hours. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. See, I can't even do math, guys. 12 minus 5. 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. I got 7 hours left. So yeah. Thank y'all for watching this video with me, and if you've been blessed, subscribe, hit the bell to get notifications. Give us a thumbs up for the algorithm purpose. Share it with others if you think they could be blessed by it. Most of all, keep this ministry in prayer. If you believe that God's blessed you, you can find the PayPal link underneath the About section of my channel, as well as under most videos. And yeah, I appreciate y'all once again. If you want to go back, currently another thing that I've been doing, I need to talk about this more, is I'm uploading my older videos into shorts of my inductive Bible study methods that I taught. And so if you want something to take at within 60-second intervals that you could study systematically, then I recommend that playlist underneath shorts. God bless.